The translator hesitated. At exactly 2:17 p.m. on October 14, 1972, inside the press room of the Peninsula Hotel in Hong Kong, a question was asked that no one had the courage to repeat. The journalist who asked it was American, a critic from a major Los Angeles newspaper. He had flown to Hong Kong specifically for this press conference, specifically to ask Bruce Lee one question. A question designed to humiliate. The translator, a young woman hired for the event, heard the question in English. Her face went pale. She looked at Bruce Lee, then at the journalist, then back at Bruce Lee. She didn't translate. "Mr. Lee," she said quietly, "I don't think I should." Bruce Lee's eyes narrowed. He had understood enough of the English to know something was wrong. But he wanted to hear it properly. Wanted everyone to hear it. "Translate it," he said, word for word. The translator swallowed. Her hands were shaking. She translated, and the room went cold. This is the story of the question that crossed every line. The critic who thought he could break Bruce Lee with words. And the response that proved why words were never Bruce Lee's most powerful weapon. This is the press conference that almost ended in violence. Hong Kong, October 1972. Way of the Dragon had just premiered. The film was a massive success, breaking box office records across Asia. Bruce Lee had written it, directed it, starred in it, choreographed it. It was his vision, completely realized, and audiences were responding with unprecedented enthusiasm. The international press was paying attention now. Hollywood was watching. Journalists from America, Europe, and across Asia descended on Hong Kong to cover the phenomenon. The Peninsula Hotel press conference was meant to be a celebration, a victory lap. Bruce Lee addressing the global media, discussing his success, his future plans, his vision for martial arts cinema. 50 journalists filled the room. Cameras, microphones, notepads, the machinery of international media attention. Bruce arrived at 2 p.m. He was in excellent spirits. The film's success had validated everything he had believed about himself, about Asian cinema, about what was possible when you refused to accept limitations. He took his seat at the head table. Raymond Chow sat beside him. A translator was positioned nearby to assist with questions in languages Bruce wasn't comfortable with. The questions began. The first 30 minutes were routine. Inquiries about the film's success. Questions about the Coliseum fight with Chuck Norris. Discussion of future projects, including the highly anticipated Enter the Dragon. Bruce answered with his characteristic blend of confidence and charm. He demonstrated techniques when asked. He told entertaining stories. He was performing the role of international star with practiced ease. At 2:15 p.m., a hand rose in the back of the room. The journalist was American, perhaps 50 years old. Gray hair, expensive suit. He introduced himself as a film critic for a major Los Angeles newspaper. He said he had flown to Hong Kong specifically for this press conference, specifically to ask Bruce Lee one question. Bruce nodded. "Of course. What's your question?" The critic smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Mr. Lee," he said, "I've reviewed all 3 of your Hong Kong films. I've studied your career trajectory, and I have to say, there's something that puzzles me." Bruce waited. "You're clearly athletic, clearly charismatic, clearly popular with Asian audiences who perhaps don't know any better." The room shifted. The phrasing was strange, condescending. The critic continued. "But here's my question. Given that you have no formal acting training, no dramatic range, and frankly, no ability to do anything on screen except punch and kick like a trained monkey, why do you believe Hollywood should take you seriously as a leading man?" Silence. The kind of silence that feels like pressure, like the air itself has become dense. The translator, sitting beside Bruce, had heard the question in English. Her face had gone pale. She looked at Bruce, then at the journalist, then back at Bruce. She didn't translate. "Mr. Lee," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I don't think I should." Bruce Lee's eyes narrowed. He had understood most of the English, enough to know the question was hostile, but he wanted the full weight of it. Wanted everyone in the room to hear exactly what had been said. "Translate it," he said, word for word. The translator swallowed. Her hands were shaking. She translated. Every word. The comment about Asian audiences who don't know any better. The phrase trained monkey. The dismissal of his abilities, his training, his worth. When she finished, the silence was different. Not confused silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Dangerous silence. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because what Bruce Lee did next would define the difference between anger and power. Bruce Lee didn't move. For perhaps 5 seconds, he sat perfectly still. His body relaxed. His face calm. His eyes fixed on the American Critic with an intensity that made several journalists in the front rows lean back involuntarily. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, more frightening than any shout. I want to make sure I understand you correctly. The Critic shifted slightly. The confidence in his posture wavered for just a moment. You flew 10,000 miles, Bruce continued, to ask me why I believe I deserve to be taken seriously. And in asking that question, you compared me to an animal. You dismissed my audience as ignorant. You reduced everything I've accomplished to punching and kicking. He paused. Is that accurate? The Critic tried to recover his composure. I was simply asking. You were simply insulting. Bruce's voice remained quiet. That's different. He stood up slowly. Not aggressively. Just stood, rising to his full height behind the table. Let me answer your question. The room was frozen. Even the cameras had stopped clicking. You ask why Hollywood should take me seriously. The answer is that I don't need Hollywood to take me seriously. Hollywood needs to take me seriously. He began to move around the table. Slowly, deliberately. My films have grossed more money in Asia than any Hollywood production has ever grossed here. More than your biggest stars. More than your most expensive productions. Audiences who you claim don't know any better have made me the most successful actor in the history of Asian cinema. He stopped walking. Faced the Critic directly. You call me a trained monkey. You reduce my art to punching and kicking. Let me tell you what punching and kicking actually requires. His voice hardened. 15 years of daily training. The study of multiple martial arts systems. The development of a personal philosophy that synthesizes Eastern and Western approaches. The physical conditioning to perform movements that most trained athletes cannot even attempt. The creative vision to choreograph fight sequences that have never been seen before in cinema. He stepped closer to the Critic. What do? You watch films and write opinions. You have never trained your body for anything. You have never created anything. You sit in comfortable chairs and judge the work of people who risk everything to bring something new into the world. The Critic's face was red now. Whether from embarrassment or anger was unclear. Bruce continued. You dismiss my audience as ignorant. These are the people who have supported Asian cinema for decades while Hollywood ignored their existence. These are doctors, teachers, workers, families who save their money to watch something that speaks to their experience. They are not ignorant. They are hungry. Hungry for stories that represent them. Hungry for heroes that look like them. Hungry for proof that their faces, their cultures, their struggles are worthy of the screen. His voice dropped lower. You are the ignorant one. You flew 10,000 miles to demonstrate how little you understand about the world outside your narrow American perspective. The room was absolutely silent. Bruce looked at the other journalists. I want everyone here to understand something. I did not come to Hong Kong to hide from Hollywood. I came to Hong Kong to build something. To prove that Asian films could compete with anything the West produces. To create a platform so successful that Hollywood would have no choice but to pay attention. He turned back to the American Critic. Enter the Dragon is being produced right now. Warner Brothers. Global distribution. The first major Hollywood film with an Asian lead. Not because Hollywood suddenly developed good intentions. Because I made it impossible for them to ignore me. He leaned slightly toward the Critic. That is how you get taken seriously. Not by asking permission. Not by waiting for approval. By building something so undeniable that the world has to acknowledge it. He straightened. Your question reveals everything about you and nothing about me. You came here to diminish. To mock. To reduce. You failed. And every journalist in this room witnessed your failure. He returned to his seat. Next question. The American Critic sat in stunned silence. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions. Anger. Embarrassment. Perhaps something resembling shame. He did not ask another question. He left the press conference 10 minutes later, before it concluded. He never published the article he had planned to write. His editor later received a letter of resignation. Some said he never worked as a film critic again. Share and subscribe. Because what happened after the press conference reveals something even more important. The other journalists in the room responded differently than expected. Rather than treating the confrontation as scandal, as entertainment, as fodder for gossip columns, they treated it as revelation. A British journalist approached Bruce after the conference. Mr. Lee, he said, what you did in there. That wasn't anger. That was something else. Bruce looked at him. What do you mean? You could have destroyed that man. Physically, Yes, but I mean verbally. You could have humiliated him far worse than he tried to humiliate you. But you didn't. You made your point, and then you stopped. Bruce nodded slowly. Anger is easy. Control is hard. Anyone can lose their temper. The discipline is in knowing exactly how much force to apply. No more. No less. He paused. In fighting, this is essential. Too little force, you lose. Too much force, you cause unnecessary damage. The master knows the precise amount needed to achieve the objective. He touched his chest. The same is true with words. That man tried to provoke me. He wanted me to lose control, to prove that I was the animal he called me. If I had attacked him with full verbal force, if I had destroyed him completely, I would have proven his point. He smiled slightly. Instead, I defended myself, stated my truth, and stopped. Now he has to live with his own failure, his own words, his own inadequacy. That is worse than anything I could have done to him. The British journalist was quiet for a moment. You've thought about this a lot, he said. Bruce nodded. I've been fighting my whole life. Not just with my fists, with my existence. Every day, someone tries to diminish me, to reduce me, to put me in a box they can understand. He looked toward the door where the American critic had departed. The temptation is to fight back with full force, to destroy every critic, every doubter, every person who underestimates you. But that's not fighting. That's reacting. The fighter who only reacts is controlled by his opponent. He touched his temple. The true fighter chooses his response, measures his force, achieves his objective with precision, and never gives his opponent the satisfaction of proving their assumptions correct. That evening, Bruce returned home to his apartment in Kowloon Tong. Linda noticed something different about him. A quietness that wasn't tension but wasn't relaxation either. Something contemplative. What happened today? She asked. Bruce told her about the critic. The question. The response. Linda listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. How do you feel? Bruce considered the question. I feel tired, he said finally. Not physically. Something else. He sat down heavily. Every day, there's another one. Another person who needs to be convinced. Another battle that needs to be fought. Another wall that needs to be broken down. He looked at Linda. I've been doing this my entire adult life. Fighting for recognition. Fighting for respect. Fighting to prove that I'm worthy of the opportunities I've been denied. His voice dropped. Sometimes I wonder if it ever ends. If there will ever be a day when I can just exist. When I can just make films, train students, live my life, without having to constantly prove that I deserve to be here. Linda sat beside him, took his hand. Maybe it won't end for you, she said quietly. Maybe you're the one who has to fight so that others don't have to. Bruce looked at her. Think about it, Linda continued. Every battle you fight, every wall you break down, every person you force to see you as worthy, you're making the path easier for everyone who comes after. For Brandon, for Shannon, for every Asian actor, every Asian filmmaker, every Asian person who wants to be seen. She squeezed his hand. The fight is exhausting because you're the first. You're clearing the path. But the people who follow you will walk on ground that you prepared. Bruce was silent for a long moment. That's a heavy burden, he said finally. Yes, Linda agreed. It is. But someone has to carry it. And you're the one strong enough to do it. Bruce looked at the window, at the Hong Kong skyline, at the city that had given him his second chance. The critic today, he said. He flew 10,000 miles to insult me, to try to break me. He represents everything I've been fighting against my whole life. The condescension, the dismissal, the assumption that people like me don't belong. He paused. But he also represents something else. Fear. He's afraid of what I represent. Afraid of the change I'm bringing. Afraid that the world he understands, the world where people like him get to decide who matters, is coming to an end. He turned back to Linda. That's why he attacked so viciously. Not because he believes I'm worthless. Because he knows I'm not. Because he can see what's coming. And it terrifies him. Linda nodded. So his attack was actually a compliment. Bruce almost smiled. In a way, yes. The most threatened people attack the loudest. If I were truly as insignificant as he claimed, he wouldn't have bothered flying 10,000 miles to say so. He stood. I will keep fighting. Not because I enjoy it. Not because I want to. Because the fight is necessary. Because someone has to go first. Because the walls won't break themselves. He looked at Linda. But I'm grateful. For you. For this home. For the moments of peace between the battles. They remind me what I'm fighting for. October 14th, 1972. Peninsula Hotel, Hong Kong. A critic flew 10,000 miles to ask a question designed to destroy. He left with nothing except the weight of his own failure. And Bruce Lee continued to fight. Not because he wanted to, because someone had to go first. 9 months later, he was dead. But the path he cleared remained open. And the people who walked it would never forget who had prepared the way. The critic is forgotten. Bruce Lee is eternal. That is the difference between those who tear down and those who build. The builders remain. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real-life themes.